Good evening, everyone. Yeah. Good evening. Welcome to the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library and to this beautiful space overlooking Fifth Avenue. We are gathered here tonight because of these incredible folks for a program called Top Shelf 2025 Fiction All-Stars. This is a panel celebrating authors featured on NYPL's recently announced Best Fiction Books of 2025 list. My name is Brian Jones. I'm Senior Director of Reading and Engagement here at the New York Public Library. Every year, in case you didn't know, our expert librarians curate lists of the year's best books, and they do this in a wide range of genres: romance, comics, horror, memoir, history, and, of course, literary fiction. Right now, 26 of our best books, including many best-selling and award-winning titles, are available for immediate download as or audiobooks. Now, maybe you're used to when there's a popular title, maybe you're used to waiting, but you don't have to wait. If you have a New York Public Library card, you can start reading them right away. So go to nypl.org/bestbooks to learn more about that. Really, there is so much you can do with your New York Public Library card. By show of hands, how many people here have New York Public? All right. Excellent. For those listening along, that was a lot of people. For everyone else, now's your chance. You're here at the library. So while you're here, we hope you get a library card and come and check us out. And those who are following along online, we hope you're able to visit us again soon. Please don't forget to stop by the check-in desk after the program and fill out a short audience survey and get a free prize. And now let's start the show. Tonight we're welcoming renowned authors Isaac Fitzgerald, Angela Flournoy, Kitamura, and Sebastian Castillo for an invigorating conversation about their recent works and their thoughts on some of the year's best books. Thank you all again for joining us, and I'm pleased to introduce tonight's moderator, Isaac Fitzgerald. Take it away.
Can we just keep it going for the New York Public Library staff and everybody that makes great events like this happen? I'm so honored to be up here on the stage with y'all. I'm so happy to be talking about y'all's books as well as some of our favorite fiction books of the year. But I wanted to just start just to get a lay of the land. If you could just describe a little bit about what your book is about. And one thing I noticed while reading them was there's definitely like a container to each one of your stories. One could say academia, one could say the acting world. Obviously, there's many other interactions happening at that same time. One could say it's about coming of age and grown, basically. And so I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about your book and then what drew you to that as almost a setting. And anyone can take it away if anyone's feeling brave, bold, or we could bounce back and forth.
Mine is about an academic who is going to a New Year's Eve party. He's taken a vow of silence for a year, and he's excited to see old classmates, and he wants to impress them. He thinks that he's changed himself in a sort of fundamental way, but is kind of deranged and deluded about this. And the party doesn't go as planned.
My novel is about an actress who's very much in the middle of her life. She is happily married. And that life is upended when a stranger comes to her, a young man, and tells her that he believes he is her son. And from that point, two different narratives unfold in the book. And in terms of a container, it's very much set. It's set in New York. It's set in the world of theater. But I think, to me, the container was actually the apartment where a lot of the book is set. And it's a novel that has no references to the pandemic or to a virus or to vaccines, but it is a novel that is about people being stuck in a small apartment and driving each other crazy. So I think that I would say that's my container.
I love that.
So my novel is about a group of friends. Isaac, you said it's about getting grown. So yes, it's a coming into middle age novel. So it follows
spans time, yeah.
Yes, it follows them from their 20s into their 40s. And if there was a container, I think that the container probably is the group chat, honestly, which is, a thing and not a thing at the same time, but it feels very emblematic of the book begins in 2008 and it goes to a little bit into the future, into 2028. So it feels emblematic of like the last 20 years also.
Yeah, I love that. And just real quick, can we talk, what drew you to academia? Just to, because you had to go first, so I felt like that put the pressure on you. You gave a great...
I just came up with a voice, and I had a character, and I'm an adjunct myself, and I have many friends who are also academics and adjuncts, and so it just felt like an appropriate place to set that character.
Yeah. I want to ask about characters too. Did you guys think of the concepts for these novels first and then kind of try and find the characters that fill them in, or did you find the characters on the page? What, as you realized that this was the next project that you were tackling, especially yourself, you had so many characters, it's kaleidoscopic, like there's so many different characters in your book. What drew you to them? How did you kind of come to them? Did you go into this knowing that you had them? Like, it sounds like, Sebastian, you kind of did walk in. It's like, this is the guy, I'm building it all around him. But and how did you kind of know that you were on the right track?
Are we going to do a different order now?
And also, you can talk to each other. I'm very freewheeling here.
I think I had the sort of broad idea first, and it's been 10 years since my first novel came out in between this one, and I think that's why it took me so long, because it's really not how I can write a novel. But I found myself, it took me some time to figure out who the people actually were, and in hindsight, I realized that it's because I don't have questions about my ideas. I have questions about people. And so it wasn't really until the people became in focus, but not sufficiently in focus, that I had enough questions to actually write a whole book around.
I mean, I think I often start with what feels to me almost like an ethical question or dilemma of some kind. In my last book, which is called Intimacies, it was really about what are the costs and limitations of empathy, as well as the necessity of empathy. In this book, it was really, if a stranger comes to you with an impossible demand, what are your obligations to that person? That was a little bit the starting point for me, and then usually character follows from voice, and then plot follows from character. So it's usually that kind of arrangement, but it's often a situation where I'm not sure myself what I would do in that situation in my actual life. And then I like to kind of try to unpack it slowly.
For me, it's voice. It's always, I tend to write in the first person, and so it's the way that a narrator sort of configures their life, how they rationalize the things that they think and feel. That's where the character really emerges from.
I mean, and again, they are all stunning, and I would argue that that's another thing that each of these books has in common, is they are really wrestling with self-identification is like such a bland way to put it, so I apologize. But like basically how we present ourselves to the world, what we think of our, like you just mentioned your character as being somewhat delusional. Many of your characters are trying to figure out, who am I? What am I in this friendship group, or what am I in this family dynamic? Obviously, very much about the different choices we make and how we present ourselves. Do you think, like, I mean, you just mentioned that it doesn't mention the pandemic at all, but that it's still very much a part of this book. Do you guys think that this kind of wrestling with who am I, or these characters wrestling with who are we, comes from something that was happening in the last 5 years, 6 years? And if the answer is no, that's fine too.
I mean, I think it's often, I don't know how it is for both of you, but for me, I very rarely set out to write about the temperature, so to speak. It's just that it ends up in the book anyway. And I do think a lot of my book is about constructed realities and about dueling realities and irreconcilable versions of events. And it's also a book about gaslighting in a lot of ways. And I think the last 10 years have really been about being gaslit from the very highest perch in the country. So in that sense, I do think it's a book that has come out of the kind of culture that I'm writing from. And I think the kind of fragility of identity, in the sense that we can see how identity is being constructed but also falling apart, is part of that.
For me, having began working on this book, before the 2020, I still think that the project of it being also about the last 20 years of American life was something that I didn't necessarily begin way back in 2016 when I started working on it, thinking would be so central to it. But what I realized since 2016, kind of immediately after, is that the ways, I think, in this country that you can kind of live, confidently, that there are like capital P politics that happen, but that they're separate from you. The mechanisms we use to convince ourselves of that, which has not necessarily ever been true, or not true for all of us, but I think it feels less and less true for more of us. And so it felt like there was really no way to talk about, they couldn't just be, hanging out in the group chat, like, without the world that we all live in around us. Around them, like entering the actual narrative.
Like you're tackling climate. There's like all sorts of different stuff in the book. There's like
right, and there's a way that I think, I don't know, probably 10 years ago I would have said, "Oh my God, it's full of capital I issues." But this is one of the sort of, this is why it's so tiring to live right now, because the capital I issues just they present themselves, and it's not just because we're maybe on social media more, so we have more information, but in the sense that, you remember those wildfires, like fall of 2024, it's just orange outside, or it just smells like it is reality. Like we are living in it. It's not just it's not abstract. And I think it feels that we're living in a time where things that perhaps some of us had the privilege of it feeling abstract, fewer of us have that privilege anymore.
For me, I think that a lot of the contemporary stuff in the book was more incidental to character. Like, I needed to place him historically, and so he watches a lot of YouTube videos, and that's gonna seep into his consciousness and inform the person he is. For I was gonna say for better or for worse, actually just completely for worse. And so it was really like characterological that I approached that kind of stuff. It wasn't like I sat down and I was like, what are the issues that I am interested in addressing in this novel? I never really write that way. It always emerges from what did this character gravitate toward? Yeah.
Did you have to do a lot of watching of said YouTube videos under the guise of research?
I watch them myself sometimes, once in a while. Well, so one of the things that he's really into is like working out, and he's following all these fitness influencers because he wants to get in really good shape, and he sort of thinks of himself as above it, but he's still very much a consumer of this stuff, and he's unaware that he's a consumer, and so it's one of the kind of faults of the character. Yeah.
Absolutely. Did you, when you're creating these characters, and I'm going to move to just real quick, and you're playing with form, because that's I do like, all of your novels are very different in the forms, but they are all, I don't, again, experimental is this word that gets thrown around a lot, and I don't feel like it's experimental, but there is different ways in which you each, some more subtly than others, but play with form. Do you feel like that form influences your characters obviously, and I'm going to put this one right on you. Like, it very much does. And like, how do you know how much you can get away with, would be the way I would put it, or like how, like, where you can really bend it but not break it?
I mean, that's a really great question that I wish I knew the answer to. I mean, when I was writing Audition, I knew that what I wanted to write about was this sense that there are aspects of certain universal experiences that feel irreconcilable. And at a certain point, I thought I could either try to write about that, or I could write that sense of dissonance directly into the form of the book itself. And so the book is split into two halves, and the two halves cannot be reconciled. They're mutually exclusive in a lot of ways. And that was one of the kind of technical challenges of writing it. And I think I would not have written it that way for the sake of writing it that way, but I think it was because I was interested in this idea of the cognitive dissonance that we all live with all the time, that it felt it felt like it would justify the form in a way. I mean, I started writing the book when I didn't start writing the book. What am I saying? I started thinking about the book when I just had my second child. And so in a lot of ways, the book is about the experience of early motherhood and trying to make art, and how sometimes those do feel a little bit like they're at odds with each other. So in some ways it came from a very personal place, even though it seems quite abstract, the structure of the book. It was very much grounded in certain questions I was trying to explore on a personal level.
Did you, I mean, and tell me if I'm going too far, but did you yourself maybe feel a little torn asunder?
Yeah, I mean, so the book is about an actor, but you never really see her on stage, and it's much more, I think, focused on the question of performance and the role of performance in the construction of identity, and which I think is something that, of course, you see in a amplified way on social media now, perhaps, but I think is something that has always been very fundamental to how we function in the world. And so, you know, if you look at young children, they learn how to be a teacher or a parent or a baker or a bus driver or whatever, you know, through role play, through performance. And that's part of how as an individual you learn what it means to exist in the world. And I think I had kind of slipped very far from understanding or being aware of that level of performance. And then suddenly when I was a mother, I was very conscious of it. I felt like I was going around looking at other people, trying to understand what it meant to be, to kind of fill this role. And that was a really interesting moment to understand how much kind of culture is shaping what is meant to be the most intimate and quote unquote natural relationship of all, is actually very much conditioned by narrative, the narrative soup that we all live in.
As we try to figure ourselves out. You also both have a bit of, I mean, so there's one of the characters is a blogger, librarian. You also have obviously a lot of social media. You already made reference to the YouTube. How did you feel bringing the internet into your book? And I feel like it's a big part of your, like, is that just like, hey, it's part of life now, and so why not?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like I wanted to explore the internet necessarily as a subject, but it's more that, yeah, I felt like in this particular character's life, it plays this outsized role and influences how he thinks of himself in ways that he's probably not aware of, and ways that maybe he is aware of slightly too. And so it felt like a right fit for subject matter for this particular night. The book takes place in one night. And yeah, he's interested in going to this party because this former classmate of his, he sees his recently divorced on Instagram. And so he goes, well, I'll go to the party. And, you know, and so like it slips into his life in all of these different ways. And so it felt like unavoidable to talk about it. Yeah.
It's interesting. I wonder when we're going to stop feeling like the internet is
Separate.
Yeah.
take me to task, girl.
No,
Go.
no, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Like I talked a lot. I wrote a good portion of this novel alongside friends when I was living in LA, and most often I was just cringing through it, and it became clear that the reason I cringed so much was just because thinking deeply about the internet is embarrassing. But it's also it just is like, did people feel this way about, like, you know, the Telegram? Like, it's so embarrassing because it was just in media. Like, they just started putting it in stories, but there is something about it that feels like we should know better, but we don't, right? Because we're there all the time. And so I do think that there was no way I could talk about like the last 20 years and not talk about social media and talk about the internet. In particular, there's one character who begins, or like we meet her, she is a librarian, and then she has a moment of virality that makes her decide that she kind of likes having people look at her on the internet and having a kind of audience. And so she becomes a reader, put this very generously, she becomes a social media public intellectual.
Nice.
And which is, you know, better than like just influencer, right? To think about, I think that's how she would think about herself, is like a social media public intellectual, but writing every single thing. So we see her actual writing, but writing all of that, it was deeply painful to me. And I think it is just because it is what most people, they're not reading novels. The thousands of words that they consume a week are just the things they're scrolling through. But it's also reading it's like writing we don't value, and we don't even necessarily trust, and we don't even necessarily know the provenance of it, but we are reading it, we are consuming it, and trying to put that into literature felt bizarre and like dirty in a way that I don't know if it has to do with like, I don't know, getting an MFA or what, but it felt also necessary to do.
Okay,
I was gonna say, I
yes,
feel
here
like
we go. Now we're bouncing. Get in there, baby.
One of the difficulties of representing the internet in literature is that phenomenologically, like the internet is the experience of quickness and multiplicity, and there's like a million things happening constantly really fast. In literature, at least my experience of it is slowness. It's singularity. Like you can only read one word at a time, right? And so they just sort of seem like, I don't know, at odds formally, and so it always feels kind of like hackneyed and odd and corny to reference stuff from the internet in a novel. I mean, I did a lot of it, so like I obviously made peace with the fact, but you know what I mean? It always feels like they just don't fit together, which, yeah, I don't know if anybody has yet figured out how to do it right.
Well, what you're saying, one of the things that are so fleeting is like the language that is used itself. Like there are turns of phrase that everyone will use, like the sort of sentence construction, not me doing something, like not me going to the library to see Katie Kitamura. Like that is already something that feels like it was from 6 months ago, like it's not from today. And so thinking about how do you put it into this slow place, it feels like a fool's errand. But I really did try to remember, like, this is the things we were saying in 2010 on the internet. Like, this is what people were saying in 2015 on the internet, but it is deeply embarrassing. But I think it's important. Maybe I feel like it's also, there's something kind of optimistic about trying to write about the internet, because you believe there'll be a future where someone will want to know, right. What it is we were all spending our time doing,
Right. What was the 6-7 of 2012? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Thank you. So sorry. It just brought to mind while you were describing that. Like, I remember when cell phones became a thing in movies, and all of a sudden you would just have Tom Cruise be like, my battery's out. And then just move on. Like, like you could tell that like movie screenwriters and movie makers were trying to figure out how to work around this thing, basically. And then at some point, and I don't even know when, it did kind of become much more smoothly integrated into our experience and thus into our art. But this is gonna go down the line here, because I want to ask you about acting, but I'm gonna ask you guys about this what you're just talking about as well. Did you have somebody you ran either internet piece or even academia, or like ran things by to figure out, kind of almost the same question I was asking her about bending but not breaking? Like, when is enough enough? Did you have people, or did you just kind of intrinsically figure that out yourself? And I wanted to ask, like, with the acting world, did you, and maybe we can start with you because they were just talking, but how, like, did you do research into that? I mean, what did that look like for you? Did you just go see a lot of plays?
I just started Ben Lerner's new book called Transcription, which I think has a very good description about the anxiety of losing your phone. It made me very anxious reading it, and it's very, very well done. I think Ben writes about the internet very well, actually. And in part, I was also thinking about somebody like Patricia Lockwood. I think in part one of the reasons why they do it so well is they're not interested in it making sense 10 years from now. They're interested in the fact that it's a document that people will look at and say, oh, that's what we were saying in 2010. But it's something that I find so hard. I find it really, really hard, and I know that I avoid it a little bit. If I could, I guess I would set everything before the internet existed. But
real quick, what was Lockwood's book? Why isn't everyone talking about this? Everyone should be talking about this. Anyways, if you're looking for a book about the internet, look up Patricia Lockwood's. Not most recent, but the one before that.
The one,
just phenomenal. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
It's kind of written in tweets.
Yep.
Tweet in the tweet form, and in a lot of ways, of course, that kind of narrative has moved on, and that's kind of what makes it so delicious. But I'm going to stop talking about somebody else's. Sorry, I feel like I'm getting off topic. But one of the things that's really interesting is to read that book against her most recent book, which is about having COVID. And again, is a kind of book that feels to me like it is dedicated to a historical moment, in the same way that it made me understand that her book about the internet is also dedicated not to a form, but to a historical moment when we were all online and there were certain memes and things that we all understood and that we don't necessarily anymore. But in terms of acting, I mean, when I first moved to New York in 2008, a lot of my friends were actors, playwrights, directors, and they were all putting things on in these very small kind of like 80-seat theaters downtown, like the Rattlestick. And I was in a really nice time in my life where I felt like I had a lot of time. So I would just go to their rehearsals and just sit in and watch them. And I had no intention of writing about it, but it meant that when I started writing the book, there wasn't that much research that I had to do because I just kind of imbibed it through my social life at the time. And then, of course, one of the pleasures of having something like acting, or in my other books, interpretation or translation, is that they touch on some of the same, I think, creative questions that writing does. So I really do use it as an opportunity to think about how writing works for me and what it means for me.
I just went with my gut. I mean, I spent a lot of time on my phone. I know what the internet's like, you know? It's like, I didn't really have to do very much research, or maybe the last 10 years of my life was the research without my knowing it. And yeah, fingers crossed it works. I don't know. I don't know what people are going to think in 10 years, you know? Yeah.
I think it does. And also, I love that. Basically, same answers. You're just like,
right.
we hung out in these spaces. Yeah.
Same answer again. I used to be a part of this blogging group for a blog called Post Bougie, like way back in like 2008, 2009.
Whoa. Cool. Sorry, keep going.
And my friend Gene Dimby started that blog, and he's like, a lot of the people who were part of Post Bougie, like Joel Anderson, who's at the Ringer now, these people are still writing on the internet, but they're doing both. Like, they're real journalists, like for real journalists, but they also still have like very active social media presences. And so even though I sometimes like have to retreat because it's just different to write a novel, right? You just can't like be plugged in all the time. But I've never necessarily like devalued what it is to write on the internet or to be a person who is on the internet a lot. Like, I don't necessarily like, I mean, it's different to be very online, right? Like, but I even think that has sort of morphed to mean different things over the past like 15 years. And so not all of those things are still archived, but I just remember a lot of just various ways, like just rhetorical approaches that were like popular at one time or another, and how they've changed. And so when I was, especially for the character Monique, when I was thinking about her like 20-year journey on the internet, I was thinking, even though I don't make it clear all the time, but like, oh, this is a Blogspot. Oh, and now this is a Tumblr. Like, it's not all the same where she's writing these things. And ultimately, of course, it's like she's got a Substack and a podcast, because this is where we are now. But like, thinking about how people, maybe you know some of these people, but how people have still figured out ways to have their own voices, even though they have had to follow, or they've desired to follow, these different kinds of like publishing platforms, essentially.
Can I just real quick follow-up question for you before another big one for everyone? Were there any like, so it's a the book's a friendship group. Were there any friends that like didn't make the cut? Were there any characters? Were there any characters that you like played around with a little bit, and you're like, not you, you're out?
No, I think the opposite. So there's 4 friends, and then there's a 5th character who is like the estranged sister of one of the friends, and she was not supposed to be in the book so much, but she just sort of like, initially I thought she would be kind of an inciting incident, like this estrangement from the one sister would be why this friend would be in search of sisterhood, and that would be the thing. Like, we wouldn't really see this other person, but it just felt like the book meditating on sisterhood had to kind of keep her around. Yeah.
So if anything, one of the characters got louder and,
She got louder,
and
yeah.
elbowed their way in. Speaking about one, the spaces we inhabit, but two, the books that we read and how they inform our work and inform our art. I wanted to ask, it's a two-part question that I really enjoy asking people, which is, what books, and it can either be in topic or in form, do you see your book in conversation with, or maybe motivating in some way? But also, writing a book is very hard. It is a big endeavor. So I like to think that people must have a reason, in that maybe they see a hole in the literary landscape, or just something that maybe is not being spoken of enough. So it's a two-part question, but like, what books do you see your book in conversation with, either topic or form? And what hole were you maybe trying to fill in the literary landscape? Sorry, that's a big one.
For me, reading Dag Solstad's Professor Anderson's Night is the thing that actually generated Fresh Green Life. I read that book and I was like, I want to write something like this, and I did. So that's one, and the other would probably be Woodcutters by Thomas Bernhardt. Just sort of this sort of obsessive monologue narrator. Those are the two that come to mind.
I met Dag Solstad at a fish restaurant.
Oh man,
in Norway, and
just passed away.
It was one of the most exciting encounters I've ever had at a book festival.
No, hang on, we're gonna drop in there real quick. Did you say at a book festival or fish?
It was a book festival, but it was in a fishing. It was in Stavanger in Norway.
Wow.
At a fish restaurant. Yeah, sorry.
Did you walk? Were you like mid fish restaurant? Did you walk up and?
I was in a. I was in a fish restaurant. He walked into the restaurant, and it was like, I mean, he's incredibly adored. His work is incredibly important in
Crazy
Norway.
hair.
Yeah, and it was like everybody stopped, and it was like Tom Cruise had walked in with his old cell phone or something. It was just like this incredible atmosphere, and then he came and had to say hello to every single person at the table. Yeah, he's a great, amazing writer.
I love him. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny. I think usually it is generally books are the big reference point when I'm writing a novel, and like a writer who's really important to me is Javier Marias, a Spanish writer who also died.
One of my favorites.
Also died recently. In the case of this particular book, though, it was really films. So the films, I was really looking at films that were cut in two. So Vertigo by Hitchcock, Lost Highway by David Lynch. Another film that was thematically important was Persona by Bergman. So and then also The Servant by Joseph Losey. So I was actually looking at a lot of films, and I think the book is actually a bit more in dialogue with film maybe than with novels, which is unusual for me. But in terms of a gap, I think I can't see. I mean, I know. Of course, the Morrison line about writing the book that you want to see is something that I think about a lot. But I think I somehow it is. I'm never quite able to move to such a kind of macro picture somehow. And I think I'm often thinking about what I want to write in relation to things that I haven't done in my own fiction yet. So it is quite small scale in a way, but it's one thing that really struck me is I think we're always thinking as writers, like what are the things we haven't done? What are the tools and the possibilities of the form that we haven't used yet? And it really struck me that I hadn't really done anything with form and structure. And so I wanted to do something with structure and see if structure could do some of the things that we conventionally associate with plot. Like, can you use structure to make something feel like a plot twist? Can you use structure to create momentum and kind of narrative drive? And so I think I was writing more towards the kind of hole in my own work and seeing if I could fill it.
Can I ask, did you try other forms first before you?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, completely. I mean, when I started writing the book, it was a very straightforward novel. It was about a childless couple who meet a charismatic young man who is probably a charlatan of some kind, who insinuates his way into their family unit, and they start to role play that he is in fact their child, with kind of various consequences. And I wrote about maybe 50 pages of it, and then it was like I was driving on a very straight, well-lit road, and I could see all the way to the end of the road, and I knew exactly where the novel was going. And for me, if there's no, as a reader, I feel like I can feel when the writer, when there's no discovery at all for them, when there's no risk, when there's no uncertainty, and so I thought I did not want to write that book. So then I kind of started rethinking it and trying to find ways where it would be a bit more like the kind of doctoral quote about driving with your headlights, where you can only see 30 feet in front of you.
Love that.
It's a multi-part question.
Yes. If you need a refresher, it is which books are your books in conversation with, and what hole in the literary landscape, or perhaps in your own work, to crib that, were you trying to fill with this book?
Got it. I agree with the idea of like, if you can see, if it's like a well-lit road and you can see all the way to the end, it feels, there's something about it that as a reader and a writer, it feels like there's that magic, like that moment where you feel like, oh, something has changed in this writer. If you don't feel that, the book it could be, technically proficient, but it doesn't have that thing that makes you, for me, for like the book sticks with me. Nobody has ever asked me what books. That's so crazy. Nobody's ever asked me that. But this is, I'm gonna not say the hubristic one first. So,
But yeah, come on, say it first.
To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. And then, but I don't want to spoil, so I won't say that much more about why. But some ideas about like the way that book is structured, and the way that the book approaches like a big change, but also A Visit from the Goon Squad by Jennifer Egan, just thinking about friends and thinking about like a nonlinear approach to like a group changing over time, even though those friends are like not necessarily all as close knit as my friends, of course, but not my friends, my characters. But also The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño, thinking about especially in the earlier part of the novel when they're young, and like a feeling of like the way that it feels like it's so connected to like the place, and how you feel like you know so much about the milieu of these characters just even by the vignettes, like the part of the book that's just like a bunch of interviews of people, and how like so quickly you feel like you know so much. And there's probably another book I've forgotten, but I really actually take comfort in feeling like everybody has already, like there's writers who've done everything, because then I feel no pressure to, like, I also agree with like what Morrison, like write the book that you need to exist. But I feel like that doesn't necessarily mean on this sort of like grand scale, as much as like a very specific approach that I can kind of own. And so instead of feeling like I need to write the sort of the great millennial novel or like the pivotal book about Black women friendship, I feel like I can write a book that is about this particular period of time, and from this my book is mostly set in New York and LA, about Black New York and LA during that particular period of time in a way that I haven't read before, and that's it. Yeah. Which is, I think, not very it's very more micro than like macro. But for me, it was also about figuring out how to aesthetically approach some of like just to like remain excited while writing the book, how to keep myself excited in like this idea that I had embarked upon, but also how to make the reader feel on like in a reader experience level some of the big concerns of the book, rather than just by what happens on a plot level.
But it's something that I absolutely loved, was the focus on friendship. I'm just going to say it. I
Thank you.
really loved that was kind of the front and center. We're going to open it up to questions shortly, so think about your questions. And notice the word is question, but we will think about them. I'm going to do one quick lightning round here, and then we're going to turn back to your wonderful, very short and thoughtful questions. We are talking about the best books. Your books have been selected, and people love them. It's Jay. I have to embarrass you a little bit, all right? I didn't do it. The New York Public Librarians did it, all right?
Thank you to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thanks.
But I wanted to give you an opportunity to shout out a book that you absolutely loved and adored this year, and I'm going to broaden it to it doesn't have to be a 2025 book, but a book that you read this year that you just absolutely adored, absolutely loved. And I can start if that's. I'll just. The Wayfinder by Adam Johnson is phenomenal. It's massive. It's giant. It's intimidating. The pages turn like nothing. There's a character list at the beginning of the book that is very helpful. But it is a phenomenal book.
Things in Nature Merely Grow by Ian Lee, which I read a couple weeks ago, which is very spare memoir about the loss of her second son. Both of her sons died by suicide. And she's just one of our greatest living writers, even with this terrible topic. It's a beautiful book.
I mean, I will absolutely second that. I think Ian is one of our greats. I mean, I know she's one of our great writers. I just read I know this is a very annoying thing to say because it's not out until next year, but I just read a novel by Giada Scodelario, which is really, really, really fantastic. It's called Ruin's Child, and it's being published by New Directions, I think, next April, and it's really ambitious. It takes some cues, I think, from Virginia Woolf as well, but it's a kind of kaleidoscopic, really formally inventive, very, very special book. And then I love Flashlight by Susan Choi. I thought that was an extraordinary book. It made me think a little bit of like Savage Detectives, what it does with time, and the kind of breadth of the novel is really very special. I loved a small novel, a short novel by a Swiss writer called Ariana Cook called Overstaying, which is translated by Damien Searles. I thought that was wonderful. I could go on, but I will stop.
Wait, hang on. What was that last one about, though? Overstaying.
It's about hospitality in some ways. It's about a stranger who moves into a woman's house, but it's unclear if the stranger is a human or a dog.
Love it.
For me, I read it like 2 years ago, I think, about Ed by Robert Gluck, who I think is one of the greatest living writers in English right now. It's a memoir that he worked on for over 20 years about a former lover who passed away. It's extremely moving, really beautifully written. I would say Seduction Theory by Emily Adrian. It's a really fun and, it's a novel I really love that came out this year. And one translation, let me think. This technically came out last year, but it's called The Queen's Ball by Copy, who is an Argentinian writer who wrote in French. It's just one of the most batshit insane psychedelic novels I've ever read. I recommend it to everybody. It's incredible.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Round of applause real quick. Thank you so much, you all. That was one. I mean, to be honest, I was like, whoa, time is flying. Like I felt like we were just really getting started. But I would love to open it up for some thoughtful questions. And I didn't mean to be such a jerk, by the way.
Hi. For Angela and Sebastian, did any of your characters experience like fatigue from the social media involvement?
My character sometimes feels shame. Maybe not enough in the opinion of her friends. But, I think when making a living off of social media is an entirely different and to me very fascinating endeavor than just being on it a lot. And so she often does feel that there are like just the act of self-narrativation that we all do on the internet, like it has a potential to actually alienate you from yourself. But when you're doing that for money so that you have an even heightened awareness to like what worked, what didn't, there are moments when she does not feel great about that.
No, he loves it. Yeah, he's just can't get enough of it. Actually, I kind of feel the same way.
Consequences.
With zero consequences, I kind of feel the same way too. And that, like, I've been able to sort of carve out the kind of stuff that I want to look at. I know it's like evil for all the obvious reasons and etc. But like, I love that I can like watch this Italian farmer like hang out with his pigs. Like I watch videos of that. Like all that stuff is great. So, but yeah, he doesn't have any fatigue, and maybe me just a little bit. Yeah.
But it is, I mean, and again, it's another through line, I'd say, almost between all three, which is how we present ourselves, like the different ways in which we choose to present ourselves.
What is one question you would like a library book club to discuss about your books?
Oh, great question. I should have asked that. That's a good question.
Do you think the author of this book is like a nice, cool guy? I don't know. I can't think of it.
Handsome, even? Yeah.
Well, I feel like both of our novels have an ending that is enough for book clubs to talk about. You know,
I guess, yeah. What I mean, how
What happened?
honestly, why not? Like, that's okay to talk about it. Like, it's okay. Yeah.
I mean, my book is designed to be very open to interpretation, and there's kind of 3 or 4 different ways of reading it. But there are also other ways that I had not thought of, but that feel, when explained to me, completely like, oh yeah, I didn't know I was doing that, but I was doing that. So I guess I'm kind of interested in how important is the writer's intention, because I think it's not that important. I think the book is made by the reader. But yeah.
Same. That's right.
Did you? And you're good? We got them all? All right.
I
didn't know if the handsome one. I didn't know if the handsome one was real or not.
No, that wasn't real. Come on.
So I feel like this is both for you, Angela, and it's kind of more generic about the internet and forms in which writing take on the internet. I feel like a lot of just everything now is kind of being streamlined and optimized into like a few sets of like content creation, with like the advent of LLMs as well. Do you feel that the like various forms going from like blogs to Substacks, tweeting, the loss of that is, I guess, I'm not sure how to phrase this, valuable in terms of the character of the writing produced? Like, do you think there is like a pretty dramatic loss there?
I recently read, finally, feels very late, Stay True by Huasu, and he writes about, he was like a big zine guy in high school and in college in the 90s, but he writes about what people used to spend time doing on the internet in the 90s, and it was really just being weird, right? Like finding other people who were into the things that they were interested in and going deep on it, which, you know, there's still Reddits that do that and stuff. But because nobody knew how to really make money off of it, it was like a kind of spirit of just like generosity and like sharing. Like he would send people like weird CDs or cassettes he had, and sometimes they would send him back things. Absolutely, the more that people have figured out how to make money off of the internet, the more that I do think that there is that potential for, again, even if you have an independent spirit and you have a Substack or whatever, you are aware, you have the metrics. You have the metrics down to a really potentially demoralizing degree. Like, it's not only that they don't like when you just write like this really honest thing about real life. They don't even look at it for 2 minutes, right? Or they scroll just this much when you write about pop culture or a celebrity. They scroll to the end and they comment. And that absolutely, if that is how you're making a living, that absolutely flattens what people are willing to share or write in those spaces. But then every day there's just, does anybody follow on Instagram Rico Taquito? No? This is just a creator who is very, very funny. He is just a gay Latino man from Texas who lives in New York who is very, very funny. And he absolutely has sponsored content, but he also just is really good at like making these little videos that feel like they're inside of your brain in this way, that it doesn't seem like it is just for content's sake. It is like he would be doing this anyway. And that's, I guess, the best case scenario of the dark place we find ourselves in. But more often there is a kind of sameness, you know. brought to you by the same 5 brands and on the same, there's like 2 companies who own these platforms. Yeah.
Yeah, I really think any scene, basically any scene, is worth documenting, I would say, and fictionalizing. And I think we're seeing more and more books that tackle the internet. But I also I still think there's so much room for I think about message boards from the 90s and
I don't think it's nostalgia to say that it used to be much better than it is. Yeah.
Factual, exactly.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
All right, have one back
couple more.
here. Yeah. I
This
have one here.
All right, I'm getting to you, Cardigan, though. Go ahead.
Hi, this can be for anybody. Actually, I wanted to know, do you feel the pressures of following the rules of writing? Or do you feel free from that pressure once you've published a book?
I teach on an MFA program, but I didn't get an MFA, so I don't know the rules of writing, which is something that I say to my students on the first day, which I think actually unnerves them a little bit. But I genuinely don't, and I can be with people who know how to talk about craft in a way that I don't know how to talk about. For me, writing only works if I feel very free, and so I always start by assuming nobody will read it, and that's how I started writing fiction, and that's how I operate now when I'm writing fiction. So it feels very, very private, and I think it feels less free once it moves further down into the process. But to me, I think if I couldn't retain that feeling, I would probably stop writing.
Yeah, I feel like, not that I need to rank arts, but I do feel like literature in particular offers the greatest possible freedom and permission of, I'm not going to say of every artwork, or every art form rather, but that's what it seems like to me. Obviously, that's why I'm a writer. So following that sense of freedom and experimentation and just allowing what happens to happen, I think is really important. Yeah.
I'm from LA, and I spent some time living there, almost 5 years. Before a year and a half, and I moved back to New York. But I was reminded when I was there of exactly that, the way that there's other art forms, like trying to make a movie, for instance, that slowly but surely, there's the pragmatic side, what costs money, and then there's just what people think will sell, and it just starts to whittle away at what the initial sort of ideal was. And I joke about oh, maybe I do this or that because I got an MFA. But honestly, I think that the reason that I enjoy writing is exactly that, the freedom part of it. And I don't feel like I'm just not very interested in rules. You can maybe have moments when you're writing where you're like, if I do this thing, certain book clubs are not going to pick up this book. But you know what? It's I just have this one precious life. And so I just do the thing anyway. Mm-hmm.
My favorite quote from Wayne's World. Led Zeppelin didn't make music that everybody loved. They left that to the Bee Gees.
Yeah, I like the Bee Gees.
I like the Bee Gees.
Yeah, I like that. Everybody likes that's the whole, everybody. All I'm saying is have progressive rules on grammar, girl. Break your rules. All right, one last one, Cardigan, right here, just because I promised it.
So this question is to Katie. You mentioned a bit about how your own experience with motherhood kind of shaped your novel in a sense. And I was just wondering how much of you did you pull back from in terms of your experience with motherhood, being that it could be a deeply personal thing or could be up to a lot of criticism. And so how, I don't know if you mind sharing it, but how transparent did you get with your own experience and journey through motherhood with your book? And did you find yourself sometimes shying away with with things you want to share if it just felt like it was too transparent or reflective of your own life?
I mean, I feel like one of the things that I have learned from writing books is that you're all over your book, whether you want to be or not. And I think when I first started writing fiction, I thought it was a place where you could conceal who you were in some way. Maybe you write in other personas and voices. You write about experiences that are different from your own. My first novel was entirely male characters, for example. And then at a certain point, I realized that that particular novel was about, which was about mixed martial arts, I realized was actually about my own experience training as a ballet dancer and my relationship with my mother. And so I think realizing that whatever you do, you're all over the novel, that it is an active exposure, whether you like it or not, means that I find that I no longer try to control that, because I think it's inevitable. I mean, the novel is, I mean, my children are quite young. In the novel, it's a much older experience of parenthood, but I think a lot of the emotional core of the book is of course comes from me, because I'm the person who wrote it. So I think I understand that vulnerability is part of the contract of writing fiction in a lot of ways.
Can we give another round of applause for our panelists?
Isaac, thank
Nicely
you so
done.
much.
Nicely done, all of you. Keep it going for yourselves and for all the staff here at the NYPL. Morgan, I believe, is going to join us to say a few things.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you, all of the authors, for this enlightening conversation. After they get situated, we're all going to head out to the lobby. You have your books. We're going to do some meet and greet, book signing. And lastly, of course, we also have a program survey. Please fill it out. We would love to hear what you thought and what you have to say back about the program. Thank you so much, and have a good night.